Earthquakes! A stampede in Israel kills at least 40 at a religious ceremony. The latest on Benjamin Netanyahu's quest to form a government. The Society of Catholic Scientists and a 2021 conference discussing extraterrestrials, AI, and minds beyond the human. The latest on the Palestinian Authority canceling their elections. And a global coronavirus update in which China and India agree to help one another. Pfizer and BioNTech are allowing adolescents to be vaccinated in the EU. France is now offering adults to be vaccinated by June 15th. Turkey is now entering its first full lockdown. And traits and small minute sources of the Indian strain of the coronavirus is now being found in Europe. And what's the latest with this super blood moon and the celestial signs in the sky that keep increasing with greater frequency? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, Brother Wayne here from Alabama. This channel is all about world news and how it correlates to biblical prophecy. Well, welcome everyone. Today is Friday, April 30th. If you're new to this channel, I would strongly urge you to subscribe to receive daily news updates on what goes on in the political and how it correlates to the spiritual. And if you've been to my channel before, welcome back. Well, today we want to jump right into the verse of the day, and we're going to be in the book of Jeremiah today. And Jeremiah is a great book for anyone that's looking to dive deep into really what's going on, particularly with the nation of Israel and kind of how we move forward with the nation of Israel. And we're going to be in chapter 1, and I want to just kind of share what God shared with Jeremiah. You know, when God called Jeremiah, he gave Jeremiah 3 simple commands. And he said, Jeremiah, I want you to gird up thy loins, get ready. And then I want you to arise. I want you to stand up. I want you to get ready, rise up. It's action time. And I want you to speak as commanded. Many times we get lost into thinking that we're in control, when in reality, God still sits on the throne. So let's look here at verse 17, where God instructed Jeremiah to get ready for his work and to not be scared on what they're facing on the day. So beginning in verse 17, Thou therefore gird up thy loins and arise and speak unto them all that I command thee. Be not dismayed at their faces, lest I confound thee before them. Know that we are always going to have opposition to the word. When you preach the word, when you do God's will, there's always going to be opposition that comes up against you. Remember, we're in a world in which it's a fallen world. It's a battle of good versus evil. Don't ever think that you're going to be in a position to where you're not going to have a battle. While we're here on this earth, there will be battles. There will be battles of good versus evil. And we must remember that we are in the midst of these. Remember, we do not battle against these things we can see. We battle against the spiritual battles of the things we cannot see. And so keep that in mind, that when God tells us to rise, when God tells us to be prepared and to go, you must be obedient to what he calls you to do. Is God calling you today to do something? Has God led you to do something that you've maybe been hesitant to do, that you really didn't maybe want to do, or you really didn't feel like doing? Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. But yet, you just felt God was urging you and God was planning and preparing you moving forward. But it takes an act of faith. It takes an act of obedience. It takes an act of us doing the will of the Father a lot of times to unlock those blessings, to unlock the rewards that would come from being obedient to God. So I'm going to ask you today, has God called you to do something? Has he told you to rise up? Has he told you to stand up? Has he told you to be prepared for something? Are you listening? Are you doing what he's called you to do today? If you haven't, I would strongly encourage you to get back on the path that God is directing you on, because God's path is supreme. Remember, God sets our path straight. He makes our ways of righteousness. He sets us up with those divine appointments at the right time with the right person so that his will may be done. Remember, God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the call. So is he calling you today? Is he calling you to be part of the kingdom today? I'm going to strongly urge you to be obedient in each and everything God has called you to do today. So let's jump right into the latest earthquake report. And we have several things we're going to talk about today. But of the latest earthquake report, if you follow this channel very long, you've noticed that when we get low earthquakes from 2.5 magnitude or greater, particularly during the 24-hour period of time, pressure builds. And when pressure builds, what happens? It seems like we've been talking about this a lot lately. Pressure builds, you must have a release of that pressure. The release of the pressure comes within earthquakes or volcanoes. Right now, magnitude 2.5 or greater is 28 earthquakes. In fact, right now as we speak, there was just a 2.8 earthquake in Hawaii and a 3.0 earthquake in Hawaii. We've got a 3.9 in Alaska, several earthquakes in Midland, Texas, 3.2s, a lot of smaller ones there as well as in Alaska, and as well as in Peru. There was a 5.1 this morning on the Solomon Islands. We are watching these. A 4.7 down in Argentina. Something to look at. 5.5 in New Zealand, 4.6 in Indonesia. What you can see here is pressure is building. And as we move into the weekend, as we move into the beginning of next week, as this pressure builds, we are looking for a big earthquake. We are looking for a big volcanic eruption. We are looking for a release. So the next 24 to 48 hours are very critical here as far as to what happens and for Earth really to release that the pressure. Remember, as waves of energy come in and hit the Earth either has to absorb the energy or it has to deflect it. Well, they will do both. And then as the energy that's absorbed, it has to go somewhere, right? And so as it's absorbed, it's absorbed by the Earth, it's transferred to other areas of the Earth, and it will find its weakest point, whether it's at the poles, whether it is at the deep earthquake origination spots, or if it's in the signs of earthquakes along the fault lines and or volcanic eruptions. The pressure will find its way to release. So be on the lookout for that. Now, the first story, it's a very, very sad story here, and this is from the New York Times. And roughly 100,000 people came on Mount Meron to celebrate the religious holiday. And bleachers collapsed. And it looks like at least 40 people were killed there. Now I'm seeing 44. I'm seeing a little bit numbers that it's kind of increasing. I saw one toll that said 45, one says 44. However, I am seeing that over 150 people were treated for injuries. And now this is in northern Israel when people began to come together. This is one of the worst civilian Israeli disasters in history, just to kind of put that into perspective. Benjamin Netanyahu says it's very terrible. He offered his prayers and condolences. We here from the End Time News Network, our team here, we send our condolences as well to all the friends and family that are impacted by this. Such a sad situation. Know that you are in our thoughts and prayers. And while this is never easy to see by any stretch of the imagination, we just know that and we just pray that God provides you and your families with the peace that surpasses all understanding during this time. Well, there's no easy transition here to go to the next story. So I will say that we're starting to look now at the Palestinian Authority and the elections. Remember, they have the Palestinian Authority, and this is from NPR.org. The Palestinian Authority has not had elections in roughly 15 years. And when you've got President Authority, the president is Mahmoud Abbas. And, they wanted to have elections because they've kind of been similar to other governments across the world, the Palestinian authorities. They're fractured. They've got multiple camps that want to, say, have peaceful relations with Israel, and other people and other camps that are not. They're on the opposite end. And then you kind of have some that are kind of in the middle. And you're seeing that authority in that government structure, very similar to what's going on in the world. You have this split. And next month's parliamentary elections have been called off. Presidential election. There's no easy way to look at this other than they're not going to do it. And one of the main reasons was Israel refused to commit to allowing Palestinians to vote in the Israeli-occupied East Jerusalem, which that's what Palestinian wants as their future capital, right? So Israel hasn't come out and stated this publicly, but Abbas says we will not move to hold elections without Jerusalem. Okay? So the point I want to make to you is, can you see the standstill? Can you see that it's fractured and it needs a solution? It needs someone to come on the scenes to have the solution to resolve this conflict. Remember, there shall be distress of nations with perplexity, but God also tells us that there shall be nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Ethnic group versus ethnic group. Here you're seeing this is biblical prophecy at its foremost. And so now let's take a look here at the Israeli elections. And this is from the Jerusalem Post. And Benjamin Netanyahu didn't have enough votes, right, to be prime minister. And so one of the things that you're starting to see here is a lot of people are starting to come out against Benjamin Netanyahu. And you have Naftali Bennett. Remember, he fled Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was kind of like the person that was the key, right? And if he brought over his votes, and it would get Netanyahu to it. Well, when you see these things that they're calling out Netanyahu, saying Benjamin Netanyahu is against many of the Palestinians. They're talking about how the new alliances that Benjamin Netanyahu that he's ruined some political alliances, he's created some. Really, it's kind of a hit story on him, talking about different betrayals, things like that. But the point I want to make to you is that, can you see that the Israeli government is in flux? Can you see that they need a solution even now? They need someone to come up and says, hey, I've got the solution to this. Let's do it this way and this way and this way. They're getting to a point to where everyone's going to say, what do we do? Okay, they're going to call for a solution to their problem. I hope you can see a theme here. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit here about the COVID situation in the globe, and then we're going to kind of come back to this first topic here. And so kind of around the world, one of the things we've talked about here on the network is that there's going to be a global movement for a coronavirus response. And we've hinted at it, we've talked about it, there's been several stories that have been out that have stated, hey, we need a global approach. Well, now I want you to just see, because here in the United States, we're kind of coming out of the pandemic somewhat. Things have really kind of opened back up a lot. Mask mandates are going and coming, kind of. Some states are fully opened back up. Some are kind of getting there. Some are really kind of just being more cautious than others. But a lot of that in the United States, keep that in mind. When you get this information from the United States, know that that information could even be from a Democrat or a Republican or even another party's slant. So you have to be very careful when you see this type of information coming from the United States. But we know the United States is split on it, right? So now, if you've been following on what's going on in India, and this is from the Jerusalem Post, India has been hit hard by the virus. India has actually a new strain, which we're going to talk about in a second. And the pictures of them taking people and just taking bodies out into a field and actually disposing of the bodies there by incinerations, it's hard to see. You know, you see people crying at the gates. We see it and we sympathize with you, and we feel your pain, and you are in our thoughts and prayers. And now Chinese President Xi Jinping has now offered help to India. And it says China is willing to enhance cooperation and provide support and assistance to India. We kind of knew this was coming. We really knew that this was going to be the next step. Remember, these two, India and China, have been kind of going back and forth a lot. And then, of course, you have the India-Pakistan situation, right? Nuclear weapons are definitely involved here. And so China's now trying to come in and say, you know what? Let's help each other, India. I mean, because, you know, we see it going on. And for Prime Minister Modi in India, you know, the situation there is tragic. So they're helping. And what you see here is that you're starting to see, although they may be and may have their differences in political agendas, social agendas, economic agendas, they're willing to help and cooperate with COVID. Very, very important. So now, kind of let's look a little bit into Europe. Pfizer and partner BioNTech SE applied through the European market authorization for their vaccine for use in adolescents 12 to 15. This is very big here because, you know, when you start talking about the vaccine with, you know, it started out with the elderly, worked down into the adult class, and now they're starting to kind of getting into the adolescents. So you see this. This is just kind of the process. But what you're starting to see is that they're going to roll this out about mid-May. And now you want to see Europe kind of join together, right? You know, you've got China and India over here. You've got Israel, and then you got Israel trying to help out the Palestinians and things, and really trying to help with Gaza. They're you know, and it's met all kind of objections, and the story changes drastically. So I'm going to just tell you that. But what I'm telling you is that you're starting to see a lending and helpful hand. Okay, so now in France, they're going to offer the vaccine, and this is from France24.com, to all adults starting on June 15th. Regardless of a medical condition. And it's just kind of an update in France. It says right now 15 million people roughly have received the first vaccine. It's about 30% of the adult population there. And he's one of the things France President Emmanuel Macron he's looking at is he wants to even relax the curfews, relax the nightly curfews. You got cafes, bars, restaurants, different things like that are going to actually start even outdoor serving on May 19th. But why is this a problem? Well, remember we were just talking about India, right? France now, and this is from Reuters.com, detects its first variant from the Indian COVID strain. And this is a very deadly strain. And I just want to share with you, this variant is known as B.1.617. It's currently present in India, but it has now been confirmed in France. So why is this important? Well, this is important because now what you're going to start to see is France, India, China working together. Let me say this again. France, India, China. China, India, which will turn into help the EU. So you can see the cooperation. Remember, in order for France and, say, India and China to become linked, they have to have the common thread between the two, which hence the Indian variant of COVID. Okay, so now we see France is kind of in turmoil. They're really trying to figure out what to do. They've got a plan to get out of lockdown, but then you start having this variant, and that throws a whole curveball. Well, now Turkey, and this is from the bbcnews.com, Turkey's now in its first full lockdown. And they have been hit hard. Just a year ago at this time, Turkey was considered a success and even was praised by the World Health Organization for what they're doing. Now they're one of the worst countries in the world that's being impacted this. Infection rates are soaring. In fact, looking at the highest cases in Europe, average cases per day, and this is from January 2020 to April 25th, 2021, 7-day rolling average, 52,000 cases in Turkey. And this is on BBC, and the next closest one is France at 30,000. Okay? And we're talking about them. And then you've got Germany at 22,000, which we've talked about here as well. And then you have Italy at 13,000. So you see, those top European countries are the ones we focus on. And that is what we use to determine the trends that are going on around the world. So I really hope you can see that. Okay, so now from Reuters.com. So why is this, where does this all tie in together? Are you ready? The WHO expects the assessment of Moderna and 2 Chinese vaccines by the end of next week. Why is this important? This is the vaccines that China will also use to help India as well as to help France moving forward. I hope you can see it's tying all together. It is tying all together. Well, what does this mean? Well, when you have the Ezekiel 38 war it's in the peripheral, right? You've got Turkey, you've got Russia, you've got Iran, you've got Libya, you've got Ethiopia, you've got Sudan. They're all on this side of the equation. And then over here you got Israel, and you got the United States, and you've got over here, look at the problems going on with the economy of Turkey, of Russia, of Iran, of Sudan, of Ethiopia. You know, you start talking about all the locusts in Ethiopia, even some in Sudan, and then you start talking about the economies, just inflation at an all-time high in Turkey. Iran, inflation off the charts, all-time high. Russia needs a way to feed their people. Russia needs a way to provide food, and they need an economic boost. Think about all the money Putin spent going around Syria and around the Middle East in search for oil with little or no results. Can you see that the economies are being stretched? What does it mean? The Ezekiel 38 war is an economic war that we've talked about so many times on this channel. And so why is that important? This is from faithwire.com. A super blood moon is on the way, then a ring of fire speaking toward Bible celestial signs. And I really want to make this point to you. A new lunar eclipse or blood moon is on the way on May 26th. It will be visible from Asia, Australia, Pacific, and much of the Americas. And it says, according to Forbes, the supermoon, the full moon, will move into Earth's dark central umbral shadow eclipse and will appear as a blood moon for 15 minutes. That is kind of interesting. You know, in the Bible, it talks about, in Joel chapter 2, verse 31, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And then in Acts 2:20, think about this. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and notable day of the Lord come. Can you see that the signs in the sun and the moon and the stars also show that we are right on the cusp of the Great Tribulation? Can you see that even the sun, even the moon, and even the stars are just speaking to humanity, saying, wake up, it is coming. So I'm going to just say, can you see it? Well, let's talk about the last story here, and this is going to be something that might just knock your socks off of you today. And we start talking about on Revelation and the false prophet and a false religion coming on the scene in the tribulation. And we all know that people that choose not to worship with the mark of the beast get killed in the tribulation, right? And we know that God's going to send a great delusion. And he's going to send it so that people may be fooled because they did not believe the truth. Where's that at? That's in 2 Thessalonians. And so we've got to see signs of this deception going on right now. And in fact, deception is all around us. But I thought this was very, very important. This is from the Catholic News Agency. The Society of Catholic Scientists will hold its 2021 conference in Washington, D.C. Here's the title of the conference. You ready? Extra-Terrestrials, AI in Minds Beyond the Human, June 4th through 6th. Okay, so they're going to bring invited speakers from and they're going to discuss the possibility of extraterrestrial life in the fields of astrophysics, astrochemistry, evolutionary biology, and Catholic theology. Okay, so this right here, this should excite the believer because you can see it coming to pass, right? You can see the delusion. You can see here that, we've talked a little bit about extraterrestrials on this channel. We've talked a little bit about UFOs. We talked a little bit about soft disclosure versus hard disclosure. This here is a form of disclosure. Now remember, what also goes on at the 1st of June? Remember, Congress is going to release a report in the United States about what evidence do they have for extraterrestrial life. Can you see this? From the minds of believer, we must know and we must understand that we're in a battle of good versus evil. It is a spiritual battle, and that you have good spirits, good angels, and you have bad spirits, and then you have the fallen angels. And all this goes back to the battle of God and his angels versus the third of angels that were cast down, that meant to destroy humanity and every single thing in God's creation. Or they wanted to turn around and manipulate it and use it for their own benefit, which in turn, they're trying to ruin the testimony of God and his creation. Okay? So when you see this and you see this going on as a believer, look up, for your redemption draws nigh, because God eventually is going to just pull the plug on this. He's going to say enough is enough. As in the days of Noah, as in the days of Lot, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Are you ready for Jesus to return? Can you see it? It's at the doorsteps. As a believer, as a brother and sister in Christ, you must be prepared, and you must be anchored in your faith, and anchored in your theology, and anchored in your knowledge of the Word, that we are able to have the discussion on what are these things, even with the common believer as well as a new believer, because this is going to rock the world of the spiritual believer. This is going to make people question their faith. But I'm going to tell you this: God allows tests for us for our faith, just so we can exercise and use our faith so that it may be made stronger. When these things come to pass, don't let these things scare you. Well, my time is up today. I thank you for yours. Once again, this is Brother Wayne from Alabama, and Lord willing, I'll see you next week. Have a great day.